Hi, everyone. I'm Jeanie Tillman with Single Hearted Pursuit, and I help women in their 30s and 40s, single Christian women, upgrade their dating and love lives. And I am here with Quantrilla. I know her as Quanny. She is going to be sharing about kind of her dating journey and experience and so forth, and how she met her husband and all that stuff. Quanny I met back in high school. Quanny has a very big heart and a very big personality. She's the type that will light up a room when she walks in it. I remember like laughter being associated with Quanny. Whenever you're with her, you're gonna be laughing. So that is kind of a very quick snapshot of my memories of Quanny.
Yes.
And her friends call her Quanny.
Yes, they do.
I'm just calling her, yeah,
Absolutely.
the nickname. So Quanny is, gosh, she's a mother of 3. She's a PhD student or in the
Yes,
process of getting her PhD.
that's right.
She's a blogger, a writer, a reviewer, an editor. And gosh, what else, Quanny? I know I'm missing other things.
Oh man, you know what? We both might be missing a few things. Let's see. Gosh, that might be the bulk of it. So yeah,
she's
it
a
all falls under one of those
Renaissance woman.
categories.
Basically a Renaissance woman. Does a
Yeah,
little bit
of
of
course.
everything.
Yes, yes.
So Quanny, tell me how old you were when you got married.
Oh my goodness. I believe I was 27,
Okay.
about to turn 28. So yeah, I got married in April of 2008, and my birthday was that following July. So yeah,
Nice.
27.
Nice.
Hmm.
So you're a little bit younger than our age range, but I really like your story and I just wanted you to share it with
Well,
everyone.
thanks.
So yeah, so tell me a little bit about like your dating years. How was that for you?
Well, let's see. There was always the rocky and bumpy beginnings. So, and this is from a girl who I was not allowed to date while I was at home. And, there was this whole situation about dating at home. But um, I ended up leaving home my junior year in high school and coming to Georgia Cumberland, which is where we met. And so while there, of course, you have your little interests and things of that nature, but it's not, I don't really consider high school like for real dating, but at least you get a taste of kind of how the game goes. But I want to say I probably really didn't start dating, in the serious sense of dating until I got to college. And that was very interesting, partly because I still didn't quite know who I was, and trying to figure out the dance of dating when you don't really know who you are is difficult. It's awkward, and every now and then you kind of have a good experience, but it's kind of like going from one not so hot experience to another. But I want to say once I graduated college, I was a little more self aware, a little more self assured. I had a little more self confidence. And so by then, I was able to make better choices. I ended up going to graduate school and everything, and just being in a different environment, being exposed to different people, that really allowed me the opportunity to just be fluid and flexible in my dating experience.
Okay. And if
Yeah.
you had to just sum up your single years, what words or description would you use?
So I would probably start off by saying I was very naive.
Okay.
Um, and some of that is because I really didn't grow up with, I didn't have older siblings, older cousins, or even really older friends who were dating when I was younger. So I really didn't have a lot of an example of what dating would look like. So those first years were definitely naive and, you know, tragic.
Sure.
And then we kind of moved toward We kind of moved toward more of a fun type of deal. And then I would say by the time I met my husband, I was definitely enjoying, my femininity and my singleness. And
Mhm.
so, and dating involved as well. So I would say that part was enjoyable. So
Okay.
from naive to enjoyable.
You're having fun. Okay.
Yeah.
No,
Hmm.
that actually, I relate to that too. And I feel like sometimes the more conservative Christian you grow up, the
Hmm.
more naive you can be about dating.
Agreed.
And I think sometimes that can continue maybe longer for others than,
Yeah.
yeah. So tell me, you mentioned like it started getting fun. When did it, or what made it start getting fun for you?
Um, Gosh, I think it was the fact that maybe I wasn't so concerned about it anymore. I would say that the level of fun was directly correlated with how concerned I was about it. Once I kind of let loose and um, just really just let things happen, the more fun I had, the more concerned I was with, oh, did he call? Is he going to call me back? Or, should I send him my number or should I blah, blah, blah? The more concerned I was, the less fun it
Okay.
was. So I think that is a huge part of why I started to have much more fun is that I just wasn't, I didn't, I wasn't pressed about being the one like moving things forward. So,
So
yeah,
it's kind of like you were able to let go and just enjoy the experience.
absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
very cool. So
Yeah.
tell us how you met your husband.
Oh, this is the fun story. So, inevitably, when you have two different people, you're going to have two different stories. But my story is always the one that is the truth. So,
Of course.
um,
Since you're the one on the
we
show, you have the truth.
exactly. So I get to tell this story however I want to, and it's the truth according to me. So,
There you go.
um, actually, my husband and I met in college. He was a senior, and I was a freshman. So he was, 3 years ahead, and he was on his way out, and I was on my way in. We both were biology majors, and we saw each other in our department, quite often. And all I remembered was, this big, boisterous, very happy, happy-go-lucky guy. And that's really all I saw of him. I never saw him on campus. I never saw him at church. I mean, never saw him except in that one department. And honestly, once, he left, I didn't see him again and completely forgot about him. Mainly because we just didn't have any other relationship or, community outside of that department. So it wasn't like, oh yeah, we're friends and we're buddies. None of that happened.
Just knew him
So,
from your one class, you said.
well, we didn't even have a class together. Honestly, like
Oh,
when I say we literally would just pass each other in the hallway and that's it, that's how that worked.
okay.
So here's hope, ladies. Here's hope. Here's hope. So 7 years later, um, there was this precursor to like Facebook. It was in between Facebook and MySpace. It's called High Five. Okay. I know
I,
I'm dating myself. I
oh
know I'm
yeah.
dating myself. So he said my profile picture kept popping up in his feed. And I said, oh, that's so interesting because I had not seen his profile pic pop up in my feed. But hey, however you want to get this conversation started, that's fine. So he reached out to me and he said, "Oh, I remember you. It's so good to see your face. How are things going? Blah blah blah." And I said, "Oh, things are fine. It's good to see you. I remember you. I remember he had this big smile, like he had so many teeth. That's what I remembered about him." And he was like, "Oh, everything's good, good, good." But with social media, it was still very new then. So one thing I did remember doing specifically was when he reached out to me, I made sure that he was single. Because there's messages that you can send that are not actually on the like main page. So nobody gets to see those messages but you and that person. So just to be sure that I was not falling into a booby trap or falling down a rabbit hole, I went to do what is called a status check. to make sure he was single, make sure he wasn't dating anyone,
Mhm.
and specifically to make sure no one thought they were dating him, and make sure everything was copacetic. So, he checked out,
So
I
now, what did the
responded.
status check entail?
So it basically entails looking for like mutual friends and, kind of, putting the feelers out.
Oh,
Oh, is he
okay.
dating anybody? That kind of thing. But
Okay.
you got to verify these things first now.
Sure.
Yes, verify, verify. So everything was good. And so I sent him my number. I said, oh, it'd be great to catch up. Here's my number. And because I felt so, um, I guess bold in my woman, whatever, I was just like, here's my number, and just that small act of openness, I think for me, allowed that door to just swing all the way open. And he called and he visited and we talked, and I mean all of that. And I want to say from the very first time he called, we had either seen each other or talked on the phone or something almost every day for the 2 year span of our relationship before we got married.
Wow and
So
wow.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Every day
yeah.
in contact and 2
Hmm.
years of
Yep.
long distance. You said it was a long distance.
It was a long distance relationship. At the time I was living in Atlanta and he was in New York. And um yeah, it was the complete time, and we ended up moving to different locations, but we never once lived in the same area until after we got married.
Wow.
Yeah, that was
That's
interesting.
impressive.
That, and it was interesting too, because I think when you are in a long distance relationship, it really forces you to address things quickly and focus on the important pieces. Like, if you get in the tiff with your significant other, and y'all are in the same place, we're just leaving, somebody leaves out the door, somebody goes this way, somebody goes this way, and you don't have to deal with it. But, for us, we found that we didn't have the luxury of being able to say, okay, well, can we meet at the coffee shop or, whatever, whatever. We had to like intentionally work hard to work through challenges, to communicate. And I think that laid a very good foundation for our marriage.
Oh, that's very cool. Yeah, I guess that would definitely give you the opportunity to communicate and not get distracted.
Yeah, yeah.
um, so you mentioned that um, you mentioned about being open,
Hmm.
like you reached out to him and gave him your number. Was that new for you or was that typical?
It was new. I think at some point I had decided that I was the one that would be very encouraging. I was the one that would try to make sure the lines of communication were open, and at some point I realized that that wasn't really serving me well because I found myself the initiator of everything in the relationships that I had been in. And so for me, I had decided that maybe I would just kind of fall back a little bit. And if a guy was really interested, if he was, you know, really wanting to get to know me, that he would actually take the steps that were necessary to do it. So I had kind of closed that off a little bit where I was like, I'm literally not doing anything. So when he came along, I was quite surprised at myself to say, even though he was the one that initiated the reach out, I was the one that said, hey, let's catch up. Here's my number. And so that was probably one of the first indicators for me that I had probably of some growing interest there. But I had stopped. I had stopped all of it. And I feel like it was healthy for me to go through that because it allowed me to see the difference between um, just allowing something to happen because it happens and being really intentional about spending time with someone because you want to be with them. And that made all the difference for me because I had been in several relationships where I didn't have that, where I felt like I wasn't being pursued. Um, and that was one of the major differences with my husband was that he actively and intentionally pursued me.
So there's kind of, sounds like there's been a balancing for you of not initiating everything to
Hmm.
just being open and like, okay,
Yeah,
after he initiates, then you decided, hey, I'm just going to give him my number.
yeah,
So it
yeah.
sounds like a little bit of,
Because guys need a little encouragement.
yeah,
They do need a little encouragement. Mainly because when you think about it, ladies, you're like, oh, it's, we internalize a lot, or we stay in our heads a lot. We're like, what is he thinking? What's going on in his head? But guys, some guys do that too, and a little encouragement goes a long way. So for him, he had made the first step and he reached out. So I was like, let's give him a little encouragement. Here's the number. So
yeah.
that little bit of openness on my part really, like I said, opened the door all the way for him and show me intentionally that he wanted to be with me.
Hmm. Okay. So openness, but I'm not hearing like control.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes.
Nice.
Yeah.
So tell me what made Donnie, your now husband, different.
Gosh. Well, I touched on it a little bit. The way he intentionally pursued me was different. He didn't ask me to do anything. He didn't ask anything of me. He literally just pursued me because of who I was. And that was a huge thing for me because now at that point, I had finally started to see my value. I had finally started to come into my worth as a woman. And to know that I could be in a relationship with a man who didn't need me to do anything for him, that he literally just wanted to be with me because of who I was, added to that value.
Mm.
And I believe that in any relationship that you're in, if the person doesn't add value to, I guess, what you're already seeing in yourself, then it's not worth it. Because for me, it took a long time for me to get to the point where I valued myself, where I felt like I was worth a certain standard of relationship. And
Mm.
so to have him validate that even more endeared him to me even more. So that made him different. Some of it was because he was a little older. So he already had kind of an established career. He wasn't still trying to figure things out. And that was very different for me because a lot of the dating I had done was, of course, as when I was younger. But as you start to, approach a different age, you're looking at your life and you're saying, okay, well, what do I want? What dreams and goals am I trying to achieve? And if the people that you're interested in are just still they're still trying to figure it out, it can be very difficult for you to move forward in a relationship. So I love the fact that he was already established and living his best life. So that was another thing that made him different. And he's very kind. um, I realized that dating is not for the faint of heart, but sometimes people aren't really kind.
Mm.
um, and that was something that really drew me to him, is that he was very kind. So
Mm.
that there were, of course, the obvious things. Like I said, he was established, but then there were the things that weren't really tangible, like being kind-hearted and compassionate. So
Mm.
those were definitely some ways that he was different than some of the experiences that I had before.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So there are a couple things you said, and you have to correct me if I'm wording this wrong, but you
Okay.
said that you said, first of all, that you were starting to come into your worth or understanding your worth and value, and
Hmm.
you said that he
Hmm.
validated that. So just curious how he did that. And yeah, we'll start with that question.
Okay, say that one more time because he actually just called me and distracted me. So
Naughty,
say that
naughty,
one more
nice.
time,
Still,
please.
still distracting you.
That's right. That's right.
So you said that you were kind of discovering your worth and your value, and that he,
Hmm.
I think you were kind of saying like validated that. Could you
Hmm.
describe that?
Sure. So let's say um, one example is I was at a conference when we had first kind of even before we were had the official title. Um, he found his way. So I was in Philadelphia for this conference, and he was living in New York, and apparently, he can just hop on the bus or hop on or whatever. And he literally came down for the weekend while I was there. And that was our first time seeing each other probably since we saw each other in college. And we were very new. I mean, we were still talking on the phone, like I said, we hadn't even made it official yet. But he found a way to come to where I was because I was semi close, and he showed up. And I didn't think he would do it. A girlfriend was like, well, just ask him if he wouldn't mind coming down for the day. And I'm thinking, well, who does that? But obviously, people that want to get to know you or people that value you or really are interested in you, they do that.
Okay.
And so that made a huge impression on me because I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm worth this guy spending his time and his money and his effort to come see
Mhm.
me, and that really made a huge impression on me. So it was things like that. And of course it doesn't always have to be material, or it doesn't always have to be, something that's associated with money. But I knew that if he would do that type of thing for me that early, then I knew that I had the feeling that he wasn't just putting that on for show,
Mm.
that he really was that type of person.
Right. Well, very cool. And
Yeah.
you mentioned that I think you used the word that guys expected you to do things for them
hmm
in the past, and that's how, like, kind of comparing the difference between them and Donny. What kind of things would you do, or what were they expecting from you that Donny wasn't?
So, I don't know if it was a personality thing or what, but some of the guys that I had experiences with, they really they expect a lot from the young ladies that they were attached to. So they would expect, the girls to be the ones who called, or they would expect the girls to be the ones who maintained contact, or if we were going to do something or go somewhere, the girls would have to plan it or initiate it,
Mm.
or those types of things. And that just and even though I'm not like, oh well, guys have to do this and girls have to do this, but I just felt like the bulk of the relationship was being held up on my end. So there wasn't a lot in return. So it just felt like I was striving and I was striving and I
Mhm.
was striving for relationships that weren't meeting my needs. As excited as I was to, just jump in and do what needed to be done, that wasn't being returned. So
Mhm.
it was a huge difference to see someone who would go out of his way to plan dates, who would buy a plane ticket because we are long distance, and show up,
Mhm.
or vice versa, purchase a ticket for me to come to
Wow.
him and plan dates. And you know what I mean? So um, there was just a huge difference in how the intentionality would show up in that relationship.
Mhm, mhm. And you mentioned the word like striving. You'd be striving in a relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
I can totally relate to that. Not in all of my dating experiences, but yeah, I think a lot of women can probably relate to that, where they just feel like
Mm-hmm.
they're the ones like making things happen or having to keep
Mm-hmm.
up with it. And it's nice to hear kind of the opposite of that in your,
Yeah.
current
Because you want
relationship.
it to go well. You don't want your relationship to be flat. So you're like, well, if there's some lack, I'll fill in the gaps. I'll do this, I'll call, or I'll set up a date, or I'll, drive, to the other state and make sure we see each other. And no,
Yeah. And I
and
think
no.
there's a difference between, and not that any one of those things would be wrong. It's just
Right.
when you, I guess, turn around and you realize, hey, I'm the one doing all the work, or I'm the one
Hmm.
doing all the initiating, like,
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
that's very contrasting to what you said earlier about when you started having fun in relationships, was when you could let go and just enjoy the
Hmm.
experience and not feel like you had to control or
That's right.
constantly initiate. And
Hmm.
yeah, so that,
And I think you kind of give off a vibe too. Um, and so some of that is, okay, the guy's like, well, I got it made with this girl because I don't have to do anything. She does everything. And, when you're not really aware of it, you kind of get caught in that little cycle. So you're like, oh, well, that didn't work out. And then the next time you're like, you're back at it. I don't want this to fall flat. So blah, blah, blah. And it's not that, like you said, that any of those individual things are wrong per se, but the whole point of the fact that you're in a relationship is that you're not in it by yourself. There's another person involved.
right.
And relationships should never be just one-sided. Never.
Mhm. Now, before we were speaking, you were telling me about kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, as far as when you decided, I guess, when you kind of changed your dating expectations.
Hmm.
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So here's the thing. So I'm a little on one end of the spectrum with expectations, and some of it has to do with the fact that I had some serious experiences. um for me, I had to get to the point where I had gotten so jaded by having these expectations that the pain I experienced caused me to take a look at those expectations. um you know it's not unreasonable to have expectations, but sometimes in wanting things to be so perfect, or wanting them to be, you want to make this person that you're with the one, you put unrealistic expectations on that person rather than just getting to know them for who they are and finding out that maybe they're not the one. But then expectations will have you staying too long.
Mm,
Expectations will have you doing things that you never thought you would do. Expectations will have you literally making a fool out of yourself because you are trying to force something to happen that maybe God is saying, no, that's a red flag. I mean, and you will literally drive by tons of red flags
so
and
true.
be like, well, God, why didn't you tell me? And he's like, ma'am, I was waving the flags, you know?
Right.
And it got to a point where I was so tired of having the same type of heartbreak, and I was so tired of having the same types of outcomes that I realized, hello, hi, I'm the common denominator. And I was able to just take a moment to reset my expectations. And it's not that I lowered my standards. So let's make sure we make some clear delineations here. I'm not saying to lower your standards, I'm saying to identify which expectations are reasonable and which of them are not.
Well,
And I
it
think
sounds,
that will help.
just to clarify, it sounds like when you say your expectations, it seems like you're talking about your expectations for the relationship and what that
Hmm.
relationship becomes, maybe
Hmm.
forcing something to be something that it's not, or trying to make it something that it's not. Um,
Absolutely.
and I like how
And
you
then some
worded
of that comes from also us having this fairy tale version of, this TV Disney version of relationships. So, we don't give people room to breathe and be who they are because we're expecting, that they will do X, Y, and Z. Now, like I said before, that does not remove that there should be some very basic expectations. And then on top of those basic expectations, maybe you have personal preferences or standards. And should you change them? No. But when you find there's a fine line between having, basic expectations and personal standards, and then putting unreasonable expectations on people. So
Kind of like putting expectations on someone who just isn't that one you're looking for.
exactly.
Okay. And
Yeah.
it sounds like, maybe we can get so laser focused, like you were saying, that you do completely ignore like the red
Yeah.
flags or even the yellow warning flags.
That's right. All of them.
Um, yeah, just because you're just so intent on
Yes,
what you want this to be or where you want this to go,
absolutely.
instead of just being, I guess, present and aware,
Hmm.
and allowing yourself to notice what you notice.
For sure. For
Mm,
sure.
okay.
For sure.
All right. So, if there was a piece of advice, or what would be your best piece of advice for a single woman in her 30s and 40s?
Gosh. Um, this is my biased perspective because I've spent most of my 30s married. But thinking back on how I felt when I was dating, I would definitely say, um, you are where you are for a reason. Don't feel that you have to settle. Just because you may be in your 30s or your 40s, and you feel like maybe there's slim pickings, it's okay. And don't compromise yourself or what you believe that God has for you, um, just to be in a relationship. It is a holy thing to be whole, and it is a sacred thing to join your life with someone else. And I have seen the joy and the tragedy of being with someone that you should not be with.
Mm.
Um, and that's not to say that you won't have, your normal ups and downs. But I feel like it is wholeheartedly better to be single and to not have to compromise than it is to compromise and be with someone else, and you end up completely on a different path than you even saw yourself being on. So don't settle, don't compromise. You are worthy and you are enough just the way you are, the age you are, the shape you are, the size you are, all of it. Don't change who you are, and don't try to maneuver and shift yourself to fit for someone else.
Mm.
Because in the end, I mean, we all want to be seen and we all want to be loved for who we are. So the moment you change that is the moment you end up with someone who isn't going to value you and who God made you to be. So don't settle, don't shift, don't change. Be exactly who you are, because you're going to want somebody to love you exactly the way you are.
Mm. I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I'm just looking real quick to see if there's anything that we missed.
Yeah, we don't
Um,
want to miss the stuff, girl.
I know. I guess I just want to point out, like, it sounded like through your journey, as your journey went along, you learned to value yourself
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
found your worth.
Yeah,
So I like that takeaway. It's a lie that you have to settle after a certain age.
absolutely.
Like that a lot.
Absolutely.
And this is something you said in a previous conversation, but it says what you get depends on what you allow. And you said some people are looking to use you if you allow it. Can you elaborate on
Absolutely.
that? Or
Absolutely. It is, there was like a phrase or statement. I want to say, I can't remember exactly who said it. It was one of the first ladies. Um, people will only treat you the way you allow it. And I know I'm paraphrasing her terribly, but it's so true. You will get what you allow, and when you know who you are and you know what you stand for and you know what you want, no one can treat you any old kind of way. And you know, once those orange and yellow and red flags start waving, then you need to put your foot down and be like, no, this is not acceptable. And of course, it varies for every person. You determine what you're willing to allow and willing to accept from someone, because they're not going to sit there and hold you and make you stay in this relationship. Like, you are free to leave at any time you want to. And you are free to make sure that people treat you the way you should be treated. So you get what you allow. And I know that the gospel truth, because I've experienced it. You get what you allow. When you want something different, you will find something different. And having good community is so helpful, because sometimes you won't always be able to see, because, you know, like we mentioned before, that tunnel vision, you may not always be able to see those red flags. But having a good community somebody will be like, girlfriend, no, don't allow this to happen. Don't allow this to go any further. And it's true. You will get what you allow.
I love that. I'm not even going to add anything to that. Well, thank you, Quanny. This has been great. It has been good connecting with you again.
You too. You too.
If anyone wants to follow Quanny's blog, it is thephdmama.com. Any other ways you want people to connect with you? Or is that
oh, girl, I love making friends on social media. So let's see. On Instagram, I am Quanny Boo. And then let's see. On Twitter, I am QYRD08. So those are two of the best places you can find me. I'm very active on both Instagram and Twitter. And I just love having good conversations with people. So come on over.
All right. Well, thank you. And once again, I'm Jeanie Tillman with Single Hearted Pursuit. And you can connect with me, or you can go to my website at singleheartedpursuit.com. Or you can find me on Facebook. You can just search that, or you can just say facebook.com/singleheartedpursuit.com. Or just not the .com, sorry, for Facebook. All right, well, thank you, and you guys have a great day.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.